Washington, D.C. It's a city of secrets, churning out millions of documents each day that the American people never get to see. Sometimes secrets need to be kept. But all too often, people in high places keep secrets to break the law, hide their tracks, or even make themselves rich at public expense.
That's where POGO comes in.
We are the Project on Government Oversight.
The most ass-kicking, name-taking bunch of goody-two-shoes, good government types in America.
We investigate corruption and other kinds of misconduct in order to advance a more effective, accountable, open, and ethical federal government.
POGO's view is that whistleblowers, employees, people who have tips of wrongdoing, illegality, are on the front lines of accountability.
There's a paradox about whistleblowers, and that is that they're cultural heroes. We celebrate their incredible courage, and yet we treat them as villains. You know, Dan Ellsberg faced 125 years for espionage.
If POGO had been around when I was first considering telling the truth to Congress and to the public, I certainly would have turned to them for advice. I knew that I needed it, but didn't know where to get it.
And for people who are bold enough and daring enough to risk their livelihood, come forward on behalf of the public, they deserve our protection and they deserve our respect. And POGO does just that.
This is the kind of thing that there's no longer time for in most news organizations. You know, it used to be you'd get a whistleblower call and you could spend maybe a week or two looking into it, trying to figure out, you know, is it even true?
POGO can really be a force multiplier for many news organizations because they know we have staff that really take a long, hard look at issues and then work on them over the course of months and even years. We also then try to fix the problems that we've exposed.
This really isn't about a political philosophy. This is about fixing our government and making it work for the people.
I have worked now over several years with members of the POGO staff. I have no idea what political party any of them belong to.
People are angry that they don't know how their government works, and that there are tens of thousands of federal employees that know exactly how the government works, but they're not encouraged to come forward and talk about it. And by knowing how you protect people that come forward with the information, POGO's been able to really implement successful change.
POGO began in 1981 when the famed whistleblower Ernie Fitzgerald and a group of Pentagon insiders hatched a plan with a talented 24-year-old investigator named Dina Razor.
They came to me and asked me if I would start an organization where I was their front, where they would be able to leak me unclassified documents but still remain in their job, and for me then work it, investigate it like a journalist, and then put it out to other reporters.
I mean, it was a target-rich environment. Everywhere you looked, there were programs that were, I mean, not only vastly too expensive, but horribly ineffective, putting American fighting men in great danger. There was this ridiculous anti-aircraft gun called the DIVAD. That was a wonderful thing. In tests, that thing was supposed to be able to shoot down a helicopter, and it locked onto a latrine.
POGO's revelations led Congress to create a department within the Pentagon dedicated to testing weapons.
1/10 the price.
But the American people paid most attention to the stories about ripoffs they could relate to.
$7,600 coffee brewer, the $435 hammer, the $600 toilet seat. The public really got angry.
Take a good look at this pair of pliers. How much would you guess they cost? Would you believe $999.20 apiece?
In the early 1990s, Danielle Bryan, a former intern, became POGO's executive director, teaming up with Keith Rutter to begin a new era in POGO's history. The organization's mandate had broadened to cover all of the federal government. But today, the military continues to be a prime source for scandal, from overpriced, ineffective weapons to the massive shift toward hiring outside contractors.
In the fall of 2009, we began to hear from whistleblowers who were private security contractors protecting the U.S. Embassy in Kabul.
One guy got us information and he said, oh, there are others who know about the situation.
By the end, we had 30 different whistleblowers who came to us.
And what was so fascinating about these guys is the corruption was out in the open. I mean, they were sending us hundreds of photos.
It was a Lord of the Flies, debaucherous atmosphere.
These guys are guarding the Kabul embassy, and they're acting like it's a Friday night at the State College.
One of my biggest worries is the good guys are still the ones who are really in danger and are taking the fall.
These are people who had no protections as contractors. They were coming to us because they were so concerned about the breach of the command structure, the impact it had on security of the embassy, but also the fact that it was totally undermining the whole diplomatic mission of the U.S. being there in the first place.
In the end, POGO's disclosures caused the firm Wackenhut to lose their contract defending the Kabul embassy, and sparked an ongoing inquiry on Capitol Hill into the wisdom of using contractors for such jobs in the first place.
Okay, well, welcome to another podcast brought to you by the Project On Government Oversight. And today we're going to talk about contractor accountability.
We've seen federal contract spending dramatically increase from $200 billion a year back in 2000 to over $500 billion a year in fiscal year 2010.
Is the government so reliant on contractors that they're too big to fail?
According to the Project on Government Oversight, from 2007 through 2009, more than 200 Department of Defense contractors who incurred judgments or made settlements for fraud charges were awarded $280 billion in DoD contracts.
In an effort to place a spotlight on contractor accountability issues, POGO created the Federal Contractor Misconduct Database in 2002. We have over 1,000 civil, criminal, and administrative instances involving the 150 top contractors.
We're pulling in resources and putting it in one place so the public can look at the problems and see for themselves what's going on.
When there were just 3 people on staff, little tiny POGO decided to take on those paragons of virtue, the oil companies.
Over 15 years ago, we began investigating how the oil and gas industry was underpaying what it owed the federal government for drilling for oil and gas on public lands, to the tune of really billions of dollars.
They were keeping 2 sets of books, one for themselves and one for the people of America, and guess who was making the record profits? The oil companies.
It became clear to us that we just couldn't get the government to do the right thing and fix the problem. And so we sued the 15 biggest oil companies under the False Claims Act.
Next to the tobacco case, it was the largest in terms of prospective monetary value that had ever been brought.
We really felt the blowback from that. It resulted in those members of Congress who were the biggest recipients of campaign contributions from the oil industry coming after us with a vengeance.
A secret plan hatched years earlier by a group called POGO.
Some in the Republican majority brought contempt of Congress charges against POGO and against Danielle personally.
They were really going after our phone records to identify who all our whistleblowers were. There were a couple who had gone public, but there were many more who were not, that we were protecting.
They say to us, we will not tell you how we use government insiders to learn information.
What's amazing is, here was little tiny POGO up against arguably the most powerful industry in the world, and we won. Not only did none of us had to go to jail for contempt of Congress, but they ended up paying over $500 million back to the federal treasury.
And also, I am very proud of POGO for never revealing the names of the whistleblowers who trusted them with this information and really their lives.
POGO's decade-long feud with the oil companies gave them a unique understanding of how the industry had bought off its supposed regulators at the Department of the Interior. And the Gulf oil spill of 2010 offered an opportunity to move from diagnosis to cure.
POGO was the group that knew of the consistent patterns of failure of oversight and were the first on the ground to really work on the reforms that needed to happen with the offshore regulations.
And we now have a total reorganization of the Department of Interior that will hopefully address some of the sort of systemic corruption that's been happening there.
Wall Street has more than its share of greedy bastards who enjoy robbing us blind. But there are some rare, special souls in high finance who actually want to rat out the greedy bastards. And POGO wants to listen.
POGO played a role in promoting a lot of really important provisions in the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Bill. For example, the SEC and other government regulators now have much more authority to provide awards and protections to whistleblowers in the financial industry who are uncovering really serious examples of fraud, but are often unsure about, reporting these things to their own boss, or they're often fearing, retaliation against themselves.
And what they pointed to were two of the biggest Ponzi schemes that were out there, the Madoff scheme and the Stanford scheme, and said in both cases there were whistleblowers that were there that were not heard. And if you don't reform the way in which this is done, you won't hear those whistleblowers in the future.
That argument persuaded Congress to include protections and awards for whistleblowers in the final package of Wall Street reforms.
One thing we certainly know after 30 years is it doesn't matter who's in the White House or who's running the Congress. We are always going to be busy at POGO. There's always going to be work to do and challenges to push the federal government to be as ethical, open, effective, and accountable as it should be. And those are things that while every politician talks about them, neither party owns those issues, and we will always be pushing them to do better than they're doing.
You don't know who's going to contact us, who's going to email us. When that phone rings, are we going to be sent down a whole new avenue of exposing corruption and exploring solutions?
Congratulations on 30 years, POGO. Let's keep the p***s on the run.